It was a Sunday morning in late November when a passerby noticed something unusual in the woods. Near a shallow stream, tucked beneath a mess of fallen branches, lay a small, fragile figure, still, silent, and alone. That place was Cadzow Glen, a quiet park in the centre of Hamilton, Scotland, and the person found there was Amber Gibson. She had been reported missing 2 days earlier. The discovery raised far more questions than it answered. Why had nobody come forward sooner? Why was her clothing found separately? And why had someone called the children's home where she lived, pretending that she was still safe? The final hours of Amber's life would turn out to be deeply disturbing. This is one of the worst cases I've ever covered. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple regular uploads every single week. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, then join the Dark Case family now by hitting subscribe and turning all notifications on. And now for today's silly little question. Would you rather have $1 million now, or be given $10 an hour every single hour for the rest of your life? Let me know down in the comments. All of your support over on Patreon, as well as right here via channel memberships on YouTube, are so appreciated, and I really can't thank you all enough. But I'm still going to give it a go, so thank you. But now, on with the video. Amber Gibson didn't get the kind of start in life that most children do. By the age of 3, she and her older brother Connor had both been removed from their birth family and then placed into the foster care system. They were taken in by Craig and Carol Niven, and they cared for the siblings as their own and eventually became their permanent guardians. Amber grew up creative, expressive, and full of potential. She loved art, music, and animals. Her foster parents later described her as compassionate and resilient, with an energy that lit up the room. But it was clear from an early age that Amber carried a heavy emotional weight, and the same was true for brother Connor. The siblings' early years had left lasting effects, and while the Nivens did their best to provide structure and love, there were always ongoing challenges. As Amber entered her teenage years, her support needs increased, and sadly at the age of 13, she was moved back into the care system. Connor remained in the Niven home until he turned 18, and he then moved into supported accommodation. By late 2021, Amber was living at the Hillside Children's Home in Hamilton. Connor was staying just a few miles away at the Blue Triangle Homeless Hostel. Though they'd spent long stretches of their childhood apart, the siblings reconnected that year. They began messaging once again. Amber, now 16, seemed hopeful about rekindling a relationship with her brother. To her, it was a chance for a fresh start. And on the evening of November 26th, Amber told staff at the children's home that she was heading out to meet him. Amber seemed like she was really excited. Her phone was running low on battery, so she left Connor's number with the office. This was just in case. And then she walked out into the night. Connor and Amber weren't just difficult siblings. They were described by their long-term foster father as a dangerous mix. In fact, Craig Niven later testified in court that the two of them could not be left alone together. He said that they argued often, and that something about their dynamic just felt off, especially as they grew older. There were no physical attacks reported between them under his roof, but there was an undercurrent of tension that never settled. So when Amber reconnected with Connor in late 2021, after they'd both left the foster home, it was with a very cautious hope. Amber's time in care hadn't been easy at all. In June of that year, she had been SA'd by a man named Jamie Starrs while she was asleep or unconscious in his flat. She bravely reported him, and her testimony led to a conviction. Jamie Starrs was sentenced to over 10 years in prison. But that trauma, layered on top of a chaotic upbringing, still didn't stop Amber from trying to rebuild, but it definitely left her a little more vulnerable. The staff at Hill House Children's Unit didn't forbid Amber from seeing her brother, but they were definitely wary. One support worker tried to dissuade her from going out on that night, saying that it was too cold and too dark. But Amber insisted. After all, it was only her brother, so what could really go wrong? What none of them knew at this time was that Connor had recently become unstable, grown more isolated and more volatile. She didn't know that he would make a phone call later that night that would sound caring on the surface, but absolutely horrifying in hindsight. On the night of Friday, November the 26th, Amber left her children's unit just after 9:15 p.m. She walked alone through the cold, wintry streets of Hamilton on her way to meet Connor in the town centre. By 10 p.m, the siblings were captured together on CCTV. This was near Cadzow Glen. In the image of Amber, she's smiling beside her brother, completely unaware of how important this image would later become. They were still walking together when they reached the footbridge near the park. But then, Amber wasn't seen again. By 11:30 p.m, Connor appeared alone on CCTV. He was now walking away from the wooded area. He was now visibly muddy and dishevelled. His jacket, t-shirt and shorts were all now stained with red. But whatever had happened, Connor didn't seem panicked. He just walked calmly back into the Blue Triangle office and slumped into a chair. Staff did notice that his hands were filthy and that he had some small cuts on his legs and what looked like scratches across his arms. But he just told them that he'd fallen into a ditch. He then asked to use the office telephone. Connor then called Hill House, the children's unit where Amber lived. He asked them if his sister had returned safely. The staff member who answered the phone said that this call gave her a bad feeling. She said that Connor seemed evasive and confused. He told her that they'd had an argument and that Amber had stormed off, but he couldn't tell her where. Later that night, Connor showered, he changed his clothes, and he then headed back outside with a plastic bag. The next day, he sent Amber a text message, and it read, "Are you okay?" That message was never opened. At Hill House Children's Unit, staff were growing more and more anxious. Amber hadn't returned by curfew. She wasn't answering her phone either. By the following morning, Saturday, November the 27th, her absence had now become alarming. A support worker contacted Connor, and he once again told them that Amber had just stormed off after an argument, but he couldn't give a time or a location. His answers were very vague, and when he was warned that the police would now be notified, he became defensive. Staff called the police. A missing persons report was filed, and search teams began canvassing Hamilton. Amber had never run away before, so this was a real cause for concern. On Sunday morning, 2 days after she was last seen, police officers arrived at Cadzow Glen following a report of a body found. This was Amber.
Amber Gibson, sometimes known as Amber Niven, wasn't doing anything different to any other 16-year-old on the night she went missing, according to police who are now investigating her murder.
A 16-year-old death is absolutely tragic, and certainly when it's from a homicide, so our focus is to understand Amber's last movements so that we can provide some answers to her loved ones.
Amber was reported missing from the town of Hamilton just before 10 p.m. on Friday. She was last seen on Cadzow Street after leaving home in the Hill House area around 9:15 that night. On Sunday morning, just after 10 a.m, emergency services were alerted to a body near Cadzow Glen. The next day, police formally identified the body as the missing teenager. Her death was being treated as unexplained before a murder investigation was launched on Tuesday. The park remained sealed off today, the investigation happening in the shadow of a residential street.
Just utterly shocked, really can't believe it. It's far too close to home, it's really frightening.
It's a worry that girls, especially young girls, can't walk about at night time without things like this happening to them.
Police say a key part of their investigation is to establish whether Amber knew her attacker, as they try to work out what happened in the hours leading up to the death of a 16-year-old girl who had her whole future in front of her. Well, Amber's family and loved ones are, as you'd expect, said to be devastated by her death, and people who live here are left with a lot of questions as police try to reassure them in the absence of any arrests. This park is less than a 10-minute walk from Hamilton Town Centre, which they say would have been very busy at the time she was last seen. Just the smallest detail could help them move this investigation forward.
Her body was caked in mud. Her clothing had been torn. There were bruises across her neck, head and limbs. There were 15 separate injuries to her face and skull alone. A short distance away, investigators found her mobile phone. It had been smashed into 3 pieces. Her jacket that once kept her warm was now lying in the stream.
Amber was such a well-loved, bright and lively young girl who attended as a day pupil at our academy in Bathgate. Our children and staff were all devastated by the news of this tragedy and are all working together to support each other at this difficult time. Our sympathies extend to all of Amber's loved ones and to everyone who knew her.
Brother Connor posted a tribute to Amber on Facebook. It read, "Amber, you will fly high for the rest of time. We will all miss you, especially me. I love you, Ginger Midget. Goodbye for now." But the very next day, he was arrested. The CCTV footage told a real story. From 9:51 p.m. to 10 p.m, cameras in central Hamilton captured Connor walking with Amber. First they were by the shops, and then they moved on to the wooded entrance to Cadzow Glen. They were seen laughing. In fact, Amber even took a photo. She sent that image to a friend with the caption, "My big bro." They then vanished from the camera's view, and the next frame tells a different story. Connor reappears at 11:38 p.m. He's now on a nearby street, alone, looking dishevelled. Amber was nowhere to be seen, but had she stormed off as Connor said, or had something else happened? Just after midnight, a new camera picked him up once again. This time it was at the entrance to the Blue Triangle hostel. Now he's wearing different clothes, and just minutes later the camera captures him leaving once again. This time he's carrying a plastic bag. He moves out of frame and towards the hostel's wheelie bins. When he returns, that bag is gone. In a truly disturbing twist, Connor was not the only man that police were looking at in conjunction with the investigation into Amber. And this really is one of the most horrifying and bizarre things I've ever seen. Another man was involved, a man named Stephen Corrigan. He was 45 years old, and he was completely unknown to both siblings. And to all available evidence, it appears that completely by accident, Stephen came across Amber's body in the 2 days between her passing and when the police were finally alerted. And instead of calling for help, he decided to touch her in a violating manner. He then concealed her under more branches and foliage. So yes, just to reiterate, this man found a murder victim and he chose to do that rather than call for help. He later told police that if his DNA was on her, it must have been from relieving himself in the bushes months earlier. His father, William, aged 79, also stood up for his son, claiming that he was completely innocent. He said that he was with him at his home in Blantyre between the 26th and 28th of November 2021. However, forensic biologists were clear. His DNA was found in 39 locations on Amber's body. This included locations that would have been covered by her clothing. And his DNA wasn't simply present on the scene, it was concentrated. It matched skin cells and saliva. There was no other reasonable explanation for how his genetic material could get there, except for real and disgusting contact. The judge would later tell Corrigan, any decent human being, on coming across the naked body of a young girl, would immediately call the emergency services. You, on the other hand, did not. And for those choices that he made, for what he did do and for what he didn't do, he would face some real consequences of his own. However, first, both men had to stand trial. Connor Gibson's trial began in July of 2023 at the High Court in Glasgow. He denied all charges. He claimed that he'd simply argued with Amber and walked away. He couldn't explain the red DNA on his clothing, the DNA on her body, or the evidence in the bin. You see, police would investigate that bin outside the hostel and find a white Levi t-shirt, a pair of red-stained grey shorts and a face mask. Amber's DNA was on them, and so was Connor's. Forensic biologists concluded that the only logical explanation for the red, for the transfer of skin cells, and for the damage to Amber's clothing was that Connor had attacked her. He had forcibly removed her clothing, he violated her, and then he left her alone in the woods, partially buried under branches. His defense lawyer did admit that he had assaulted her, but he also insisted that he didn't mean to end her time on this earth. The prosecution laid out 21 different points of evidence, all linking Connor directly to Amber's violation, attack, and murder. There was DNA, CCTV, texts, phone calls, and lies. Perhaps the most chilling detail came from the pathologist. Amber's time had come to an end by manual pressure to the neck, and this means that the final thing she saw was the face of her brother. On September 4th, 2023, Connor Gibson stood silently in the dock at the High Court in Livingston. He was sentenced to life in prison. He must serve at least 22 years, at which point he can apply for parole.
You've been convicted of the physical assault and murder of your younger sister, Amber Niven, as she liked to be known. Like you, she had not had the best start in life, being fostered and then residing in a children's home. She also had to deal with having been raped. She would have looked to you as a big brother for support. She was looking forward to meeting up with you on the night she was murdered. She even posted a selfie of both of you on Snapchat. You walked with her to Cadzow Glen. There you beat her about the head, breaking her nose, removed her clothing, and assaulted her with intent to rape, and then manually strangled her to death. The last person she saw alive was you, her brother, strangling the life out of her, having beaten her up and tried to rape her. What you did was truly evil. In sentencing you, I take into account your age, your difficult background, everything that's been said on your behalf, background report, your lack of criminal record, and of course the circumstances of your appalling crimes. I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment.
Stephen Corrigan was sentenced at the same hearing. He received 9 years for interfering with Amber's body and attempting to conceal it.
A depraved case. I mean, that word was used in court today.
It was, and in fact the judge also used the word evil to describe Connor Gibson's crimes, which, as you rightly say, he will now spend the rest of his life in prison, a minimum of 22 years before he will be considered, and the judge stressed considered, for release on parole. Now, the crime itself was, as you say, a depraved one. Connor Gibson walked his younger sister, 16-year-old Amber, to Parklands. He then proceeded to try and cover up his crimes. He lied repeatedly, in the words of the judge, before CCTV footage and indeed forensic evidence ultimately exposed his lies, and he was convicted after a 2-week trial.
The Nivens, Amber and Connor's former foster parents, were present in court. After the verdict, they released a quiet, devastating statement. We now have one daughter buried in Larkhall Cemetery and another child in prison. Life will never be the same. They also said what many had come to believe, that Amber had been failed by the care system, failed by social services, failed by so many people that were meant to protect her, and failed by the one person that she should have been able to trust the most, her big brother. I just find it so awful that Amber was failed so many times, and on top of that, a random man then disrespected her this one final time. The world really is just so awful sometimes. What are we doing? Poor girl. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.